Hey y'all, it's Kate from LoveStory, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different. So today is election day here in the US, and I know a lot of people are either wanting to escape to a different world or have wanderlust because they can't travel because of COVID, and usually I only recommend books that I have read, but today I'm going to take two lists that I got from the novel Cure and that deal with escapist novels, wanting to escape to a different world, and the top 10 for Wanderlust. And all of the descriptions I'm going to read off for these books come from Goodreads, and like I said, I haven't read most of these books, which is unusual for me to recommend books I haven't read, but I trust the the novel Cure's recommendations. So I have my shawl on here that seems to be falling down because I want to escape to Scotland always. So let's just jump right in because this is going to be a long video because there's 20 books essentially. So the top 10 escapist novels recommended by the novel Cure and Ella Berthoud and Susan Elderkin. So first up on the list we have Corellis Mandolin by Louis de Bernières. And I'm sorry in advance for butchering almost all of these names. So Goodreads says, and I'll list all of these in the description of course, Captain Corellis Mandolin is set in the early days of the Second World War before Benito Mussolini invaded Greece. Dr. Yannis practices medicine on the island of Kefalonia, accompanied by his daughter Pelagia, to whom he imparts much of his healing art. Even when the Italians do invade, life isn't so bad at first anyways. The officer in command of the Italian garrison is the cultured Captain Antonio Corelli, who responds to a Nazi greeting of "Ale Hitler" with his own Ale Puccini, and whose most precious possession is his mandolin. It isn't long before Corelli and Pelagia are involved in a heated affair, despite her engagement to a young fisherman, Mandris, who has gone off to join Greek partisans. Love is complicated enough in wartime, even when the lovers are on the same side, and for Corelli and Pelagia, it becomes increasingly difficult to negotiate the minefield of allegiances, both personal and political, as all around them atrocities mount. Former friends become enemies, and the ugliness of war infects everyone it touches. Next up we have Demarches Menagerie by Carol Birch. A thrilling and powerful novel about a young boy lured to sea by the promise of adventure and reward. With echoes of Great Expectations, Moby Dick, and The Voyage of the Narwhal, Demarches Menagerie tells the story of a 19th century street urchin named Jaffe Brown. Following an incident with an escaped tiger, Jaffe goes to work for Mr. Charles Demarche, the famed importer of exotic animals, alongside Tim, a good but sometimes spitefully competitive boy. Thus begins a long, close friendship fraught with ambiguity and rivalry. Mr. Demarche recruits the two boys to capture a fabled dragon during the course of a 3-year whaling expedition. On board, Jaffe and Tim enjoy the rough brotherhood of sailors and the brutal art of whaling the brutal art of whale hunting. They even succeed in catching the reptilian beast, but when the whaling's venture fails short of expectations, the crew begins to regard the dragon, seething with feral power in its cage, as bad luck, a feeling that is cruelly reinforced when a violent storm sinks the ship. Drifting across an increasingly hallucinatory ocean. I guess this is spoilers, sorry about that, I didn't know in advance. The survivors, including Jaffe and Tim, are forced to confront their own place in the animal kingdom. Masterfully told, wildly atmospheric, and thundering with tension, Demarches Menagerie is a truly haunting novel about friendship, sacrifice, and survival. Next up, we have The Savage Detectives by Roberto Bolaño. New Year's Eve, 1975. Arturo Bolaño and Ulysses Limo, founders of the visceral realist movement in poetry, leave Mexico City in a borrowed white Impala. Their quest to track down the obscure vanished poet Cicero Tinajero. A violent showdown in the Sonora desert turns search to flight. 20 years later, Bolaño and Limo are still on the run. The explosive first long work by the most exciting writer to come from south of the Rio Grande in a long time, Ian Stevens' Los Angeles Times. The Savage Detectives follows Bolaño and Lima through the eyes of the people whose paths they cross in Central America, Europe, Israel, and West Africa. This course includes the muses of visceral realism, the beautiful Font sisters, their father, an architect interned in a Mexico City asylum, a sensitive young follower of Octavio Paz, a foul-mouthed American graduate student, a French girl with a taste for the Marquise de Sade, the great-granddaughter of Leon Trotsky, a Chilean stowaway with a mystical gift for numbers, the anorexic heiress to Mexican underwear empire, an Argentinian photojournalist in Angola, and assorted hanger-ons, detractors, critics, lovers, employers, vagabonds, real-life literary figures, and random acquaintances. A polymathic descendant of Borges and Pynchon, Robert Bolaño traces the hidden connection between literature and violence in a world where national boundaries are fluid and death lurks in the shadow of the avant-garde. The Savage Detectives is a dazzling original, the first great Latin American novel of the 21st century. Next up, we have A Passage to India by E.M. Forster. And this one I'm actually currently rereading right now. So when Adelia Quisted and her elderly companion Mrs. Moore arrive in the Indian town of Chandrapur, they quickly feel trapped by its insular and prejudiced Anglo-Indian community. Determined to escape the parochial English enclave, explore the real India, they seek the guidance of... Where are we? Hold on, I lost my place. Okay. Let's start over. A Passage to India by E.M. Forster. Sorry about that. When Adelia Quisted and her elderly companion, Mrs. Moore, arrive in the Indian town of Chandrapur, they quickly feel trapped by its insular and prejudiced Anglo-Indian community. Determined to escape the parochial English enclave and explore the, quote, real India, they seek the guidance of the charming and mercurial Dr. Aziz, a cultivated Indian Muslim. But a mysterious incident occurs while they are exploring the Marbar caves with Aziz, and the well-respected doctor soon finds himself at the center of a scandal that rouses violent passions among both the British and their Indian subjects. A masterful portrait of a society in the grip of imperialism, A Passage to India compellingly depicts the fate of individuals caught between the great political and cultural conflicts in the modern world. Next up, we have Even Cowgirls Get the Blues by Tom Robbins. The whopping crane rustlers are girls, young girls, cowgirls as a matter of fact, all bursting with dimples and hormones. And the FBI has never seen anything quite like them, yet their rebellion at the Rupert Roast Ranch is almost overshadowed by the arrival of the legendary Siski Hankshaw, a white trash goddess literally born to hitchhike, and the freest female of them all. Freedom, its prizes, and its prices is a major theme of Tom Robbins' classic tale of eccentric adventure. As his robust characters attempt to turn the tables of fate, the reader is drawn along on a tragicomic joyride across the badlands of sexuality, wild rivers of language, and the frontiers of the mind. Next up, we have Mating by Norman Rush. The narrator of this splendidly expansive novel of high intellect and grand passion is an American anthropologist at loose ends in the South African Republic of Botswana. She has a noble and exacting mind, a good waist, and a busted thesis project. She also has a yen for Nelson Denon, a charismatic intellectual who is rumored to have founded a secretive and unorthodox utopian society in a remote corner of the Kalahari, one in which he is virtually the only man. What ensues is both a quest and exuberant comedy of manners, a book that explores the deepest canyons of Eros, even as poverty asks large questions about the good society, the geopolitics of poverty, and the baffling mystery of what men and women really want. Next up, we have A Town Like Alice by Neville Shute. Neville Shute's most beloved novel, A Tale of Love and War, follows its enterprising heroine from the Malayan jungle during World War II to the rugged Australian outback. Jean Paget, a young English woman living in Malaya, is captured by the invading Japanese and forced on a brutal 7-month death march with dozens of other women and children. A few years after the war, Jean is back in England, the nightmare behind her. However, an unexpected inheritance inspires her to return to Malaya to give something back to the villagers who saved her life. Jean's travels leads her to a desolate Australian outback called Willstown, where she finds a challenge that will draw on all the resourcefulness and spirit that carried her through wartime ordeals. Next up, we have The Map of Love by Adef Zouf. With her first novel, In the Eye of the Sun, Adef Zouf garnered comparisons to Tolstoy, Flaubert, and George Eliot. In her latest novel, which was shortlisted for Britain's prestigious Booker Prize, she combines the romantic skill of the 19th century novelist with a very modern sense of culture and politics, both sexual and international. At either end of the 20th century, two women fall in love with men outside their familiar worlds. In 1901, Anna Winterbourne, recently widowed, leaves England for Egypt, an outpost of the empire roiling with nationalist sentiment. Far from the comfort of the British colony, she finds herself enraptured by the real Egypt and in love with Sharif Pasha al-Bourdi. Nearly 100 years later, Isabel Parkman, a divorced American journalist and descendant of Anna Sharif, has fallen in love with Omar al-Ghamrar, a gifted and difficult Egyptian-American conductor with his own passionate politics. In an attempt to understand his conflicting emotions to discover the truth behind his heritage, Isabel too travels to Egypt and enlists Omar's sister's help in unraveling the story of Anna and Sharif's love. Joining the romance and intricate storytelling of A.S. Byatt's Possession, one of my favorites, and Michael Ondaatje's The English Patient, Adef Zouf has once again created a mesmerizing tale of genuine eloquence and lasting importance. Next up, we have Dreams of Leaving by Rupert Thompson. New Egypt is a village somewhere in the south of England, a village that nobody has ever left. Peach, the sadistic chief of police, makes sure of that. Then, one misty morning, a young couple secretly set their baby son, Moses, afloat on the river in a basket made of rushes. Years later, Moses is living above a nightclub, mixing with drug dealers, thieves, and topless waitresses. He knows nothing about his past, but it is catching up with him nevertheless, and it threatens to put his life in danger. Terror, magic, and farce all have a part to play as the worlds of Peach and Moses slowly converge. And last on this list, we have The Story of Edgar Saltale by David Wroblewski. Born mute, speaking only in sign, Edgar Saltale leads an idyllic life with his parents on their farm in remote northern Wisconsin. For generations, Saltales have raised and trained a fictional breed of dog whose thoughtful companionship is epitomized by a lamondine. Edgar's lifelong friend and ally. But with the unexpected return of Claude, Edgar's paternal uncle, turmoil consumes the Saltales' once peaceful home. When Edgar's father dies suddenly, Claude insinuates himself into the life of the farm and into Edgar's mother's affections. Grief-stricken and bewildered, Edgar tries to prove Claude played a role in his father's death, but his plan backfires spectacularly. Forced to flee into the vast wilderness lying beyond the farm, Edgar comes of age in the wild, fighting for his survival and that of the 3 yearling dogs who follow him. But his need to face his father's murder and his devotion to the Saltale dogs turn Edgar ever homeward. David Wroblewski is a master storyteller, and his breathtaking scenes, the elementary north woods, the sweep of seasons, an iconic American barn, a faithful vision rendered in the falling rain, create a riveting family saga, a brilliant exploration of the limits of language, and a compulsively readable modern classic. So next up we have the 10 best novels to wander Cure Wanderlust. So these are specific to certain places, and if you're longing to go to certain places, these would be the recommendations from the novel Cure. So for Guyana, The Sly Company of People Who Care by Raoul Bagiara. In flight from the tame familiarity of home in Bombay, a 26-year-old cricket journalist chucks his job and arrives in Guyana, a forgotten colonial society of raw, mesmerizing beauty. Amid beautiful, decaying wooden houses in Georgetown, on coastal sugarcane plantations, and in the dark rainforest interior scavenged by diamond hunters, he grows absorbed with the fantastic possibilities of this new place, where descendants of the enslaved and indentured have made a new world. Ultimately, to fulfill his purpose, he prepares to mount an adventure of his own. His journey takes him beyond Guyanese borders, and his companion will be the feisty, wild-haired Jan. In this dazzling novel, propelled by a singularly forceful voice, Raoul Bagiara captures the heady adventures of travel, the overheated restlessness of youth, and the paradoxes of searching for life's meaning and escape from home. Next up we have Burma in India and The Glass Palace by Amitav Ghosh. Set in Burma during the British invasion of 1885, this masterly novel by Amitav Ghosh tells the story of Rajkumar, a poor boy lifted on the tides of political and social chaos, who goes on to create an empire in the Burmese teak forest. When soldiers force the royal family out of the Glass Palace and into exile, Ramajumar befriends Dali, a young woman in the court of the Burmese queen, whose love will shape his life. He cannot forget her, and years later, as a rich man, he goes in search of her. The struggles that have made Burma, India, and Malaya the places they are today are illuminated in this wonderful novel by the writer Chitra Divakaruni, called a master storyteller. For Spain, we have the classic For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway, and this is one of my favorite Hemingway novels. In 1937, Ernest Hemingway traveled to Spain to cover the Civil War there for the North American Newspaper Alliance. 3 years later, he completed the greatest novel to emerge from the, quote, good fight, For Whom the Bell Tolls, the story of Robert Jordan, a young American in the International Brigades, attached to an anti-fascist guerrilla unit in the mountains of Spain. It tells of loyalty and courage, love and defeat, and the tragic death of an ideal. In his portrayal of Jordan's love for the beautiful Maria, and his suburb account of El Sordo's last stand, in his brilliant travesty of La Pastoria, and his unwillingness to believe in blind faith, Hemingway surpasses his achievement in The Sun Also Rises and A Farewell to Arms to create a work at once rare and beautiful, strong and brutal, compassionate, moving and wise. If the function of a writer is to reveal reality, Maxwell Perkins wrote to Hemingway after reading the manuscript, no one has ever completely performed it. No one has ever so completely performed it. Greater in power, broader in scope, and more intensely emotional than any of the author's previous works, it stands as one of the best novels of all time, best war novels of all time. And for Japan, we have Snow Country by Yasunari Kawabata. Nobel Prize recipient Yasunari Kawabata. Snow's Country is widely considered to be the writer's masterpiece. A powerful tale of wasted love set amid the desolate beauty of Western Japan. At an isolated mountain hot spring with snow blanketing every surface, Shiomara, a wealthy dilettante, meets Komoko, a lowly geisha. She gives herself to him fully and without remorse, despite knowing that their passion cannot last and that the affair can have only one outcome. In chronicling the course of this doomed romance, Kawabata has created a story for the ages, a stunning novel dense in implication and exulting in its sadness. Next up we have Australia and Kangaroo by D.H. Lawrence. Kangaroo is D.H. Lawrence's 8th novel set in Australia. He wrote the first draft in just 45 days while living south of Sydney in 1922 and revisited it 3 months later in New Mexico. The descriptions of the country are vivid and sympathetic, and the book fuses lightly disguised autobiography with an exploration of political ideas on an immensely personal level. Based on a coalition of the manuscript, typescripts, and first editions, this text of Kangaroo is closest to what Lawrence would have expected to see in print. There is a full textual apparatus of variants, a comprehensive introduction giving the background and history of composition and publication, and a summary of contemporary views, opinions. Explanatory notes elucidate the many geographical, political, and literary allusions in the text. There are 3 maps and an appendix dealing with Australian locations. And next up we have Trinidad and Is Just a Movie by Earl Lovelace. In the town of Mosquito, Trinidad, the 1970 Black Power Rebellion has failed. Sonny Boy, hapless and luckless, is desperate to be recognized as part of the rebellion and forces the uninterested police to arrest him. King Kala, a singer, returns from detention and is sidelined in the Calypso tent. His music dated and unfashionable. They now hope to make their name in the movie that is being shot on the island, but that too does not end as expected. And so we follow the townsfolk through their experiments in music, politics, religion, and love, as in their day-to-day adventures, be it a game of cricket, the short life of a corner shop, or a miracle at a funeral. They begin to see more clearly what their community has to offer for its liberation. Sad and uplifting, humorous but never mocking, Is Just a Movie is a warm, gentle novel about small moments of magic in ordinary life. Next up we have Libya in the Country of Men by Hisham Martar. The Country of Men is a stunning depiction of a child confronted with the effects of Libyan strongman cut of 1969 September Revolution. Libya, 1979. 9-year-old Suleiman's days are circumscribed by the narrow rituals of a childhood. Outlinings to the ruins surrounding Tripoli, games of friends played under the burning sun, exotic gifts from his father's constant business trips abroad, but his nights have come to revolve around his mother's increasingly disturbing bedside stories full of old family bitterness. And then one day Suleiman sees his father across the square of a busy marketplace, his face wrapped in a pair of dark sunglasses. Wasn't he supposed to be away on business yet again? Why is he going into that strange building with the green shutters? Why did he lie? Suleiman is soon caught up in a world he cannot hope to understand, where the sound of the telephone ringing becomes a portent of grave danger. where his mother frantically burns his father's cherished books, where a stranger full of sinister questions sits outside in a parked car all day, where his best friend's father can disappear overnight, next to be seen publicly interrogated on state television. In the Country of Men is a stunning depiction of a child confronted with the private fallout of a public nightmare, but above all, it is a debut of rare insight and literary grace. For those outside the U.S. wanting to return to the U.S., the classic The Razor's Edge by W. Somerset Maugham is recommended. Larry Darrell is a young American in search of the absolute. The progress of this spiritual odyssey involves him with some of Maugham's most brilliant characters. His fiancée Isabel, whose choice between love and wealth has lifelong repercussions, and Elliot Templeton, her uncle, a classic expatriate American snob. The most ambitious of Maugham's novels, this is also one in which Maugham himself plays a considerable part as he wanders in and out of the story to observe his characters struggling with their fates. Next up we have France and Good Morning Midnight by Jean Rhys. The last of the 4 novels by Jean Rhys wrote in interwar Paris, Good Morning Midnight is the culmination of a searing literary arc, which established Rhys as an astute observer of human tragedy. Her every woman heroine, Sasha, must confront the loves and losses of her past in the mesmerizing and formally daring psychological portrait. And last but not least, we have Honduras and the Mosquito Coast by Paul Theroux. In a breathtaking adventure story, the paranoid and brilliant inventor, Ali Fox, takes his family to live in the Honduran jungle, determined to build a civilization better than the one they've left. Fleeing from America he sees as mirrored in materialism and conformity, he hopes to rediscover a purer life, but his utopian experiment takes a dark turn when his obsessions lead the family toward unimaginable danger. So I hope these lists help you in whatever you're going through right now. There was the top 10 escapist novels and the top 10 novels to cure wanderlust. All recommended by the novel Cure. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you thought. Let me know of other videos that you want me to do, especially dealing with bibliotherapy. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and I look forward to further discussion about these books. Have a great day. Bye.